Back to school season is the perfect time to set up your reading program for success throughout the year. Heading into the school year with a well-organized library, a plan for routines like First Chapter Friday and Book Trailer Tuesday, a kickoff book tasting, an appealing book display, and a regular time to read will help so much in inspiring your students to read for joy throughout the year, and hopefully for the rest of their lives. Lately, I've been thinking about a well-run reading program like a reading escalator. You want to have the books and the book PR that will help students step on and just naturally rise through the steps. So today on the podcast, let's talk about how to get started in this back-to-school season. Welcome to the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast, a podcast for English teachers looking for more creativity, more engagement, more joy, and no more scripted curriculum, lesson planning ruts, or boring book lists. I'm Betsy Potash, and I'm honored you're trusting me to help. You're not alone on this creative journey anymore. All right, first things first, if you're thinking that this all sounds great, but your library only has about a dozen books at this point, let's start by talking about building digital library shelves. You want to get your students e-access at the start of the year if you don't have an absolute wealth of physical books in your classroom, and maybe even if you do. Whether it's through your school library or your local library, back to school season is a wonderful time to work with your local librarian or your school librarian to help all of your students get a free Libby or Overdrive account so they can read ebooks and listen to audiobooks for free. Now, personally, my preference is physical books. That's just how I am, but I absolutely love having a Libby account so that when I can't get the physical book that I want, I can read it on my phone. And the other great thing about it is that when I'm in some awkward situation where I wasn't expecting to have some free time or some waiting around time, I always have a book with me because I pretty much always have my phone in case of an emergency. And I think it's the same for our students. Giving them e-access to books and audio access can make a huge impact in helping them read more, because not only will they always have access to their phone in most situations outside of school, but they'll also have access to a bigger, broader range of books. So how do you make this happen? You talk to your librarian, you work on getting them a card if it's your local library, or on getting them set up with a profile if it's your school library. Then maybe you want to give them a little tour through the reading app they'll be using. Show them how to put themselves in line for a book. Show them how to check it out. Show them how to open up the book and flip through the pages. It may all seem really intuitive if you've been doing it for a long time, but if you're really new to the process, it's helpful to see a model. Then from there, you might want to create some digital bookshelves for your students. Now, this is a super fun process. For me, when I'm creating them, it just makes me feel like I have unlimited budget for my library, which is really exciting. It's a simple process. You basically put a picture of a bookshelf on a slide in Google Slides, and then you just run around the internet screenshotting the books that you love and you want to recommend to your students. You drop those screenshots on the shelves, just as if you're creating a physical library, and then you link each little screenshot to the checkout page for that book on the library program that your students are going to have access to, whether that's Libby or Overdrive. It's a fun process. It's a helpful process. It means that your students won't just sort of be turned loose into Libby or Overdrive to find what they can find. It will allow you to kind of guide them into that electronic world. Once you've made a digital shelf or two, be sure to print a QR code poster that will take your students there. This way you can kind of connect your digital and physical library spaces. If you put a QR code poster up right next to your physical library that says, hey, be sure to check out the electronic options too, maybe have a picture of some of your digital bookshelves, and then the QR code, it's just a reminder for your students that that resource is waiting for them. Okay, next let's talk about setting up your reading library for maximum ease for your students. I want to really recommend that you set up your library in this back to school season by genre. Now, I grew up grabbing books by alphabetical order of author, and you probably did too. And yes, that is a helpful way of organizing it so that voracious readers can just quickly go and find the author they want. But for newer readers, I think having your books organized by genre is so helpful because probably they know a book that they've loved and then they kind of realize a genre that they're a little bit interested in. And if they can just go from book to book within that genre at first, I think it really helps them get a firmer footing in their reading world. So maybe you put your novels in verse together, your graphic novels together, your dystopia, your sci-fi, your fantasy, your romance, your poetry. I think this will be really helpful for your students. You're also going to want to set up some kind of clear system for checkout at this point at the start of the year and help students understand how it works. Now, this can be super simple. You can just have a pretty notebook where they write their name, they write the book they checked out, they write the date, and then when they bring it back, they cross that all out and sign their name. Or it can be a little more complicated. If you want to register all your books in a book library app like BookBuddy, that's great too. Same thing for your return system. You can create some sort of digital system, or you can just have students cross out their name on the checkout or check off their name and then place their book on some kind of rolling cart or in a crate or on an empty shelf that has a sign that says book return. The main thing is just that you have a plan, that you set up a structure that your students can follow. It really doesn't have to be fancy. It just has to be clear. And then the last thing when it comes to setting up your library in this season is I really want to recommend that you take a few minutes to set up a display at the start of the year. That can go across your windowsill, across the top of the bookshelf in your library area, or it can be like a fancy bulletin board with recommendations and blurbs and quotes. But whatever route you take, just consider somehow drawing kids over with your display. It helps so much in attracting them to the library if you have like a little theme, unwrap a great book, or beach reads, or your weekend just got booked, or student favorites from last year, or whatever. Just kind of throw some popular books across the top under some kind of theme, and in that way, you'll help to create buzz around your library. Okay, up next, let's talk about a couple of stable programs you can be running throughout the year that help generate interest in your library. And I really want to recommend that you start early with these. It's Book Trailer Tuesday and First Chapter Friday. Now, chances are you've heard me talk about these before, so I'm not going to go really deeply into them. You can go back and listen to shows on these themes in the past. But let's talk about how you can incorporate them in your back-to-school routine. First Chapter Friday is so simple. You just crack open a popular book, you read the first chapter, or maybe just like a compelling part in the early part of the book, and then you make that book available for checkout. Now, as you read, I always suggest you give students a sketch notes template or just invite them to do sketch notes on a blank page if they already know what sketch notes are. And in that way, they have a chance to kind of stay focused and jot down a few takeaways, a few quotes that will help them remember if they want to read that book later. But at this time of the year, it's a nice chance to do a First Chapter Friday or a couple of them around books that relate to the time of year. Maybe the theme is kind of like making new friends or starting at a new school. Same thing with Book Trailer Tuesday. Book Trailer Tuesday is a super simple way to feature contemporary authors. Once a week, you just pull up a book trailer on YouTube and play it for students. Book trailers are usually 1 or 2 minutes. They're so quick, but it's a really fun way to expose them to more voices, more options, inspire them to read new things. Now, as I was just sort of brainstorming what might be good books for this, New Kid by Jerry Craft came to mind for Book Trailer Tuesday. That one has a nice trailer on YouTube. It's all about a boy starting at a new school and how he's feeling. That could be a good option. Another one is Matt De La Pena's contribution to the short story collection, Flying Lessons. It's a wonderful short story about this boy and how he spends his summer right before school at this super competitive basketball court. And he learns a lot just sitting in the bleachers and watching. He learns a lot from kind of the process of going down to the court and trying to get involved in the games and eventually getting involved in the games. And then he writes an essay about the whole experience for his English teacher when he returns to school. So that could be a fun one for a first chapter Friday. And actually, if you look back in this podcast feed, and I'll link it in the show notes, you can actually have Matt read it out loud to your students. And I've already created a customized kind of sketch notes form that your students could use as they listen. But anyway, whatever text you use, now is a great time to get started with these programs. Just get it into your routine, get students used to the idea of First Chapter Friday and or Book Trailer Tuesday happening pretty regularly. Okay, another nice thing to do very early on in the year is a book tasting. You want your students to get used to your library, to start to explore the different titles, and a book tasting is a great way for them to do this. Again, for a book tasting, it can be so simple. You kind of arrange your room into tables and you scatter the books all across those tables. And if you want to, you bring in like a little snack or a beverage, or you dim the lights a little, or you put up something on your smartboard that makes it sort of look like a cafe. Whatever you want to do to make it feel kind of tasting-y is wonderful, but you don't have to break the bank for this. The idea is that your students will go from table to table and taste the books. Now, you're going to want to model for them, what does that look like? You pick up a book, you look at the cover, you look at the back cover, you kind of flip through the blurbs from other authors. You see what other books people compare it to. Maybe you read the first page or even the first couple of pages. As your students go around tasting books, provide them with some kind of little paper that's going to let them give it like a number of stars out of 5 and make a few notes like, would I want to read this book? Why would I want to read this book? Does this book remind me of other books? Just like a couple little quick places where they can make a note so that at the end of the book tasting, when they look back, hopefully they've found 1 or 2 or 3 books in your library that they are excited to read. This is a great thing to do maybe on the first day that you're going to roll out some time in class to read, just as a way of getting everybody into a book. If you do a book tasting for the first 20 minutes of class and then some other little activity, and then in the last 15 minutes of class, you're going to have a chance for them to read, they can just think back to the book tasting and check out a book that they are excited about. All right, similarly, in these first couple weeks, it's great to take some time to do a book talk or two. This is a chance for your students to start to see what kind of reader you are, what you enjoy reading, what some of your favorite titles are in the library. You just grab a book, hold it up and say, hey, this is my absolute favorite book in the library. The reason I love it is that it's like Harry Potter meets the Addams Family with a stunning surprise ending, or whatever. You just give them like a little taster of the plot, a little comparison to other books, and any other little details you want to give them. It will help them get to know you better and get to know your library better if you just sort of sprinkle these in the first month of school. All right, then as you're working with all these different kinds of PR things and you're starting to hype up your program, get kids excited about your library, this could also be a good time to just introduce a basic reading assignment for the term. Now, people do this in all kinds of different ways. Do you have to have an assignment? No. You could just encourage reading for joy, and you could give time in class for it, and you could hype up your books with lots of wonderful book PR. But for me, I have usually put in some kind of very gentle and fun accountability along the way so that I can kind of have a chance to see what kids are reading and how they're feeling about it by the end of each term. So maybe, for example, you're going to culminate the term with a literary food truck festival. Kids might read 5 or 6 different books in the term, but they're just going to share back about one in your literary food truck festival. Or maybe you're going to have everybody create a little book trailer video at the end of term. Again, maybe they read 3 books. They're going to choose their favorite to share with the class with this book trailer video. The goal for me with these kinds of reading check-ins is always to promote reading culture more than it is to sort of police students reading. And so that's really the kind of vibe you want to give to the room. It's not like, you will prove to me that you read every page of the book with this careful documentation through your book review podcast. No, it's like, hey, we're really curious about what you're reading. What's your take on it? It helps other readers get excited about new books when they get to hear back from you, whether it's through your literary food truck or your podcast book review or your book trailer video. So this is a chance early on, as you're unveiling all these cool things about your reading program, just to kind of introduce, and hey, yes, by the end of term, you do need to have read at least one book. So for kids who are more motivated by that kind of necessity, you'll help them to be on board with the fact that it is relevant to the class beyond just the joy of reading. But hopefully that little bit of structure is just something that they're going to build on to truly find the joy of reading and to truly enjoy your reading program. Okay, last but not least, this is like a bonus option. I've already given you a lot to do to kickstart your reading program. You don't have to do this too. But if in the first couple of weeks you think it would be fun to take your students on a field trip to the library and your librarian has time to work with you on this, you might consider bringing them to meet your school librarian, get to know your school librarian a little bit. Your school librarian could give like a quick talk on how they can support students throughout the year with their research, with their reading. And you could use that moment when they're in the library as a vehicle for having them create book face posters. This is something that I've seen many kids have a lot of fun with in different schools. I think it's a really fun idea. Basically, book face is this. I think, librarians started it at some point years ago, and it's really taken on a life of its own across social media. Students find a book with a face on the cover, whether it's like a cartoon face or a photorealistic face, and then they find a way for one person in a partnership to kind of be holding that book into a camera shot that features their partner as like the other half of the face. So this is a very visual thing, and I'm going to put lots of visuals in the show notes. But if you can try to picture, imagine there's like a picture of a woman's eye and like black hair around that eye. And so you hold that up, and then your partner lets their hair come down and like on the other side of the face, and you block their one eye with that book, but you can see their other eye and their hair flowing around the other side. And so in the picture, it looks like this really interesting combination where the living person appears to be like the other half of the book. I feel like I'm not doing it justice, you guys. You really have to look at the images, and people do it in such creative way. They pick up on like the colors of the cover and the feel of the cover, and they just take these really fun shots. And I made a bunch of fun examples for you, which you can use to inspire your students in a whole kind of poster to help them, which again, you'll be able to find through the show notes. So this could be a fun thing to do in the first few weeks. If you have a thriving library at your school, if you have a librarian available who can work with you, this could be a fun way to kind of integrate that larger picture of reading beyond your classroom into your launch of your reading program. Okay, my friend, that was a lot of ideas. You don't have to do them all, but I do really want to recommend that you kind of draw a line in the sand at the beginning of the year and kickstart your reading program. Don't save it till you have time later, because the year is busy, right? I mean, it just gets busier and busier. And so I think it's really important to unveil your library with energy, introduce your program, start the consistent kind of routines that you want to have going throughout the year right from the beginning. And I think it'll really help you build energy for your program. Thanks so much for joining me today to talk about kickstarting your independent reading program with lots of energy during the back to school season. Until next time, take care of yourself and stay creative.